Hello. Hi, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right.
Loud and clear.
All right. My name is Rachel Leidy. I am going to be leading today's training session. Give me 1 second here, and I got to log into FutureFeed, and then I'm going to share my screen. Okay. All right. Let's see. All right. So my name is Rachel Leidy. Normally have my camera on, but I am a little under the weather today, so I'm not going to be turning on my camera. But my name is Rachel Leidy, and I am with FutureFeed. I'm the Director of Compliance Education here at FutureFeed, and I lead most of the training sessions. This session is being recorded, okay? So after I end the call today, it takes about, an hour, hour and a half. After I end the call, then you'll get a meeting or you'll get an email with the link to the recording. And just in case you're not aware, this session is open to all FutureFeed users, so we do have multiple companies on today's call. Right. Refresh. All right, couple things. Let me close out all these boxes that pop up. Okay. When I log into FutureFeed, here's my look, okay? If you only have access to one FutureFeed environment, then when you log in, you're going to be presented with the compliance dashboard. When I log in, I do have access to multiple packages, and so
when I'm done with training, I'm gonna do the same.
Look like here. And just ask that if please be on mute while we're doing the training. All right. All right. So let's go into this sample company environment. And you guys are all users of FutureFeed. But if you would still like to have access to this sample company, maybe you want to treat it like your sandbox and test out some functionality in here. I can give you access if you don't still have access. Just let me know in the chat and I can get you access to this, and then you can use it as like a sandbox test environment. If you log into FutureFeed, scroll way to the bottom. There is this first link here, training. I'm sure this is how you signed up for today's training, but I just wanted to point out that you can sign up for many training sessions, as many as you need. After today's session, since this is training session number 1, I'll be covering the start area of FutureFeed. We'll be talking about the dashboard area. We're going to cover people, tools, and documents, and then I stop there. That's pretty much all I can get in the hour. The second training session, then I cover assess, SSP, the POAM, and deliverables, and some of these other icons up here on the top right. So after today's session, whenever you feel ready, go ahead and sign up for that second training session, and I'll cover the rest of the tool. Also at the bottom of the page, any page in FutureFeed, we have this 15 minutes with FutureFeed. This is a weekly meeting. You only have to register once though. Just register once and it's on your calendar every week. And this is open office hours with myself, unless I'm out sick. But while you're using the tool, if you have any questions, need some guidance, stuck on something, you can submit a ticket to support@futurefeed.co, or you can just jump into this Thursday session and ask for guidance there. I'm happy to help. That's what this meeting is for. It's actually a 30-minute meeting We just still call it 15 minutes with FutureFeed because that's what it's been called for a long time. But it's 30 minutes with me. And we often get to talking about 171 and the requirements, regulation, all that stuff. But I do address any FutureFeed related help questions up front so we can get through those. Okay, so I'm just going to get started. I end up talking a lot and usually running over. And so shout, stop me, interrupt me. I'm fine with all of that. If you have any questions or you need me to go over something. Let me just look at one thing though. Okay. All right, so let's go over the dashboard here. When you log into FutureFeed, you're presented with this compliance dashboard. It's just a nice graphical, semi-interactive tool that displays your level of compliance for your environment. You can drill down from control family down to the requirements and then even drill down to the objectives and jump to that specific requirement and those objectives in the assess page or in the system security plan page. Display some other information over here, requirement status, inheritance, your last poem, due date, score, some good information. So that's the compliance dashboard. We also have this assessment prep center. So what this is, each one of these rows here is a page in FutureFeed. Okay, so I'm going to go to the contract manager page. If you click on the subway stop title, then it's going to bring you to that page. Okay, there's the contract manager page. This compliance review box up here directly relates to that page I was just on. So let me show you. I'm going to assign it to Brett. Okay. Brett's been assigned as the reviewer of the contract manager page. So this compliance review section, it's for assigning and reviewing and approving the content and the information that gets captured in all of the pages or the different sections of FutureFeed. So for me, since I'm in the contract manager page, I would assign someone who's very familiar with the company contracts to fill out this section of FutureFeed and or review it for accuracy and get it approved. Okay. But this compliance review box, it's present on every page in FutureFeed, and it directly relates to the assessment prep center here. So now if I scroll down contract manager, I have it assigned to Brett. So it's just what it does is it lists out all of the compliance review status assignments in one page here. You can also change up who gets assigned from this page as well. Okay, so that's the assessment prep center, and how I use that. This is a new feature, so I've not used it fully, but how I plan to use it is whenever FutureFeed goes into an official assessment cycle for our annual assessment requirement, or whenever we go up for that external assessment, which for us, we're trying to get FedRAMP equivalency, so we would be working with a 3PAO. For you guys doing CMMC, you'd be working with a C3PAO. So whenever we go into that external assessment prep timeframe, what I'm going to do is go in here and assign the different pages to someone at my company for the purpose of reviewing to make sure that that page is filled out and it's accurate and getting it approved. You can reset them all here after you're through that review cycle. Critical dates. So this is another area for project planning, specifically CMMC here, just planning out your overall CMMC effort to include when you're implementing the requirements and prepping for that assessment. When you want to engage a C3PAO, after the C3PAO does their assessment, did you have any findings? And then how long you have to remediate those findings. When you get your certification, the certification will be good for 3 years. So when do you have to start prepping for that next triennial certification? So just project management, project dates. And what you do, what happens is when you check this little radio button, it's taking a screenshot of your system security plan for the purpose of, you can see your progress along the way. You know, for me in this fake environment, my score has improved a little bit, but hopefully for you, you'd see a lot of improvement throughout the project. All right. And then last in this dashboard area, you have individual responsibilities. This is where you can see your responsibilities. All throughout FutureFeed, you can assign responsibility or assign tasks. And when you get assigned something, it's going to show up here. So here I'm showing all my RACI assignments. Here's the requirements. If I was assigned any NIST 800-171 requirements, then they would show up here. Technology, or if I was responsible for any IT assets, they'd show up here. Security documentation. You can see all the tasks you have, and any poems or poem projects that are assigned to you would be listed here. If you're responsible for managing your team, then you would look at your team responsibilities. And again, RACI task poem. If you select someone here, let me look at Robert's. Here's Robert's assignments. Okay. So just play around there, but that's where you get to see all your responsibility assignments or your team responsibility assignments. Any questions with the dashboard area? All right. So next is the start area. And the way FutureFeed was designed, the user interface, right? What's being presented to you was that people would work from left to right, starting with start, then you go down to people, then tools documents, then you're doing your assessment, reviewing your SSP, and then you start working on all that non-compliance or your system flaws within your system POAM. So that's how the user interface was designed. I mean, you can use it however you want to. If you just got access to FutureFeed and you'd rather just jump straight into documenting or conducting a basic assessment, gap assessment, you know, nothing's stopping you from working however you want to in FutureFeed. But we refer to this blue line as a subway line. And that's why we refer to each page as a subway stop, because you would be riding the subway, and then at each stop, you're filling out the information that is captured. All right, so that's kind of how I'm going to do my training, starting over here, working up to documents, and then the next session we'll go on assess, SSP, and POAM. So in the start area, this is where you're capturing a lot of that company background information, as well as starting to define your system, the system scope, and the type of data that's being processed in the system. And if you guys could just give me 1 second, I am running low on battery and I need to grab my charger. Okay. Sorry about that. Traveling as well. All right. So company information, pretty self-explanatory. Company, logo, name, address, if you see something with an asterisk, like here, street address has a little asterisk by it, this field is being pulled in to your system security plan. So this information is going to be part of your system security plan. Scrolling down, you have the risk appetite. Okay, so here's a place for you to just identify your company's approach to handling risks and hover over the little green icon if you need some information, more information about the categories, as well as if you scroll up here in the getting started guides, it's going to provide you more information about the page and what's being collected, why that information is being collected, and give you some guidance on how to fill it out. For the assessor is, potentially how an assessor would view this information. Okay. Every page has these getting started guides, and what's presented is specific to the page you're working in. So right now, if I click over to scope, then the information that's going to be shown to me is just the scope information. Think of these getting started guides as like a built-in user guide or user manual for the application. Okay, so going back, risk appetite here, you're identifying your company's risk approach. And where this information comes into play is when you start working in your system POAM. And right now in this environment, I have 136 open items. Well, I need to prioritize the ones that I want to work on first. And typically when you're prioritizing that work, it's based on your company's risk approach as well as impact, effort, and cost. And so that's where this risk appetite comes into play. Company description, again, pretty self-explanatory here. Provide the company size, description, and then we have 2 areas for you to identify IT or cybersecurity budget and cyber insurance for the company. None of this information under cyber insurance or budget is getting pulled into your system security plan, but it does come into play with the requirements and planning for implementation, all that stuff. All right, locations is pretty important because here's where you start to define your assessment scope. Or if I'm acting as a consultant, I like to refer to it as my compliance boundary. So all of the locations, the IT assets, the people, the products that are needing to adhere to and implement 800-171 requirements. Okay, so here we start defining the locations. If you have them, you may not have them if you're an all cloud environment, but just hit add new location, fill out the data, hit save. Then after you hit save, you're going to want to open up that location entry and then fill out all of the metadata. Okay. I'm going to go over these different sections here a little bit later when I get into the technology and the documents. So I'm not going to go over them all in depth here, but just know after you log a location, click on it, and then fill out this data. An important piece that I want to show you is in the compliance area. So here is where I will define if this location is storing, processing, or transmitting FCI data, yes or no, or storing, processing, transmitting CUI data, or housing CUI data. Okay. And like I said, the rest here I'm going to go over shortly, so I'm going to just skip that. Right? Maintenance and ownership. This is where you're at a high level. defining the hardware and software maintenance and ownership for the environment. If you want some example, refer to the Getting Started guides. In the compliance implications, I've provided an example of how I would fill these out and answer these questions. But you're just, is their hardware maintained by the organization? Yes or no? And then provide the answer or rationale. And this information is being pulled into your system security plan. Scope, this is where you start defining the system. So you give the system a name, unique identifier, describe the system, describe your boundary, and identify the system type. Is it an enclave implementation? I think I described these. Let me see if I describe these up here so I don't have to go over them. Yeah. So system types, enterprise-wide, organizational unit, and enclave. So you'd select the type of system you have and you're working with, refer to the Getting Started guides for some guidance on the category options. Contracts, so this is where you're identifying first your cage code or cage codes associated with this environment, and then the different contracts that your company holds, and most importantly, the contract clauses that are present, which are driving the need to implement 800-171 and prep for CMMC, or if you're just a FCI environment, the FCI clause. Okay, so just hit new contract, fill out the information, and you would want to have someone managing this page and updating it whenever contracts change. Data inventory, so this is where you're defining the data that's in this environment. Sensitive data that needs to be protected, okay? So FCI page here, federal contract information. This is as simple as just toggling on or off the tools that are storing, processing, or transmitting FCI information. So when you first get access to FutureFeed, this is going to be blank. You do have to go up into the tools area and start logging the IT products and technology software that your company utilizes, manages, owns, operates. After you fill in the tools area, then you would go back, revisit the FCI page, and then select what tools are considered FCI assets. The CUI data inventory page is a lot more information is displayed here. And so what we've done is we've just listed out all of the NARA categories. Okay, NARA is the CUI register and registry. And all of these just hyperlink to NARA. So that way, if you need some more guidance or you maybe need to understand, a description of that CUI category, here's some marking guidance. And then down here, it's going to tell you if it's basic or specified, CUI, and some more regulation about that type of category. So let's do this international agreement information. So one thing I would do is I'd click on it, right? If you look here, international agreement information is specified CUI. So over here, I'm going to click specified CUI. And then checking the box just tells any assessor or person working in this environment that somewhere in this environment, I am storing, processing, and transmitting CUI specified data, specifically international agreement information. Okay, so it's your choice. You could just leave it with the box checked, but you can get a little more granular with it. And that's when this wrench shows up. Okay, and so how you how you do that is you have to go to your tools section, find the asset that you want to identify or connect with that type of category. So I'm going to go to my database here. Under compliance, it's already a CUI asset. And then down here, this icon, I can click on it. And let me go to that category. Where is it? Here we go. International agreement. Click the box. So now when I go back to my data inventory sheet or page, and now instead of a checkbox, I have that wrench because I've defined the specific asset. Now I'm saying that I have a Linux database that is storing, processing, or transmit international agreement information CUI specified. Okay, so it's your call if you just want to leave the checkbox somewhere in the environment we're storing, processing, and transmitting that type of information, but you can get more granular with it if you like and really define the specific assets that are handling that information, your CUI assets. Okay, it's your guys' call on how you want to approach this page. But that's what this CUI data inventory page is. You're defining the types of CUI within the environment. Then we have this sensitive data page. This is for other companies who like to then define, proprietary information, confidential information. Maybe they want to track the handling of and security of employee social security numbers. We just had a few clients ask and request to have the ability to identify other information types other than FCI and CUI. And so that's what we did here is we added this sensitive data inventory page. And then if you want to use it, scroll way to the bottom and you can create your own category. Okay. Last page in the start is settings. So you can integrate FutureFeed with a ticketing system. If you have it, you can see here, whenever you guys email support@futurefeed.co, it actually is going to our ticketing system. It creates a ticket and then it gets assigned to someone for work. So you would just put your ticketing system email address here. But a tip is you can put any email address here. Okay, so if you had maybe some compliance management personnel who wanted to get updated on POEM projects or POEM actions, then you could put their email address here. Where you see this capability then, so I have it enabled. If I go over to my system POEM and I scroll down, first zoom out. So this little envelope here. Now, if I wanted to, I could send an email update about this POEM item, clicking on it. Here's the POEM number. Here's what the POEM is about. And then I could even enter some additional notes down here and hit send. I'm not going to hit send because it would create a ticket for us, but all right. If you don't have that enabled, then you still see this little envelope icon, but it's grayed out. You can't click on it. So that's what ticket system integration is. Being able to email POEM and POEM project updates directly from FutureFeed. Here in FutureFeed, when a POEM gets created, it's going to have a due date, a default due date, and you get to control what that due date is here. So if I created a POEM entry today, then the due date is going to be 2 quarters out. So you would just set this to what you wanted that default due date to be. Of course, you can change the due date. When you create a POEM, you can change the due date. It doesn't have to be locked in. All right, down here, organizational scale. This is where you're like standardizing the language for anyone who's working in your compliance environment and creating POAM entries. You want them to all have the same understanding of what impact means for your company, what effort means for your company, and what cost means. So, for example, if you are a smaller company, then a low cost item may be $100 and a max cost item may be $5,000. If you're a larger company, you probably have a larger IT budget, cybersecurity budget, and so a low cost item for for a larger company may be $1,000, you know? So, but now everybody who's working in the system POAM will understand this scale, impact, effort, and cost scale. So when they're identifying those or they're prioritizing work, they can, everyone's speaking the same language. Okay. When you set these, then where you see this information, you could refer back to it is up here in the top right of the screen. There's a little ruler, and I can refer back to that scale when needed. Framework settings. So if you happen to be a company, you don't have any FedRAMP requirements, you could disable that FedRAMP warning pop up. I don't know if you happen to see it when I logged in, or when you guys log in, I'm sure you get displayed with it. You can disable it if you don't have that requirement for your company. All right, so that's the start area of FutureFeed. Now, people, after you fill out start, you're going to go on to start working on people. So this is where you're going to give people access to your FutureFeed environment, but also identify security-related roles and security-related teams. So think of the framework requirements. Right now, we're 800-171. Think of all those requirements and who typically or potentially could be involved with implementing those requirements. So what roles at the company, what teams at the company. And you do have to be a system administrator to create user accounts. So add user, pretty self-explanatory, employee, third-party assessor. And you could delete users, help them reset their MFA or reset their account if they need to. If you're not a FutureFeed administrator, then you're just going to see the listing of users. You should not be able to modify accounts at all. Manage roles here in FutureFeed. When you start assigning responsibility, one tip from us is that you try to assign that responsibility to either a role or a team. And that's because, for example, we'll use this incident team lead role here. In FutureFeed, if I go over to the incident response requirements, and under these requirements, you have an area for you to identify responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. And let's see. If I give it to the incident response team, which it's telling me Amy, Austin, and Bradley are part of this incident response team right now, then when Bradley, Amy, or Austin log in, they're going to see in that individual responsibility area that they have this 361 requirement assigned to them, and they need to be working on it because they're part of the incident response team. Whereas if I just directly tagged someone, let's say Mark, okay? Mark's been tagged as responsible. But if Mark leaves the company, then what I got to do is go in under all of the controls and the POAMs and anywhere I can assign responsibility and I'm going to have to remove Mark and get it assigned to the right person. Whereas if you just assign the responsibility to that team, then let's find it. It's what did I call it? Incident response team. I can go in here, add or remove members, and let's say Bradley left the company. I'm going to remove him, and I'm going to add the new person, Joe. So now when Joe logs in, all the responsibility that's assigned to the incident response team, he's going to see it. Okay. So it's helping you maintain that responsibility assignment when you have personnel transfers or turnovers, people leaving the company. Instead of having to come into FutureFeed and figure out everything that was assigned to Mark and get it reassigned, if I just assign that activity to a team or a role, then it's as simple as going in here and changing out who left and adding in the new person. And now the assignment sticks with the role and the assignment sticks with the team. And so you're not going to have to worry about getting all those assignments. Well, first figuring out everything they were assigned and then trying to go reassign them to someone else. So that's a little tip. Let's go back to this manage role section. This default accountable role setting, what this is when there's inventory items, poem projects, controls, what have you, then you can set that default accountable role here. And then under teams, you're going to build out the teams involved with implementing these requirements. The populate button, if you're just getting started with 171 and you kind of want to quickly divvy up all the requirements and have people start working on them, you can use this populate capability. And what we've done is we've pre-built some teams. Show you where I pulled that from. I'm a very visual learner. So here's by the way, if you don't know about this website, I would bookmark it, but this is like a one-stop shop for all CMMC 171 documentation. It's the DoD CIO's website. You can just Google DoD CIO CMMC and you should get here. So let me open up this level 2 assessment guide. I'm going to go to one of these requirements here. So here's a requirement: alert in the event of audit logging process failure. And under the potential assessment methods, under interview, it says, and this is the assessor's guide. Okay, so any C3PAO assessors, they're using this guide. This is what they're going to follow for guidance with evaluating your control implementation. So potentially interview personnel with audit and accountability responsibilities, personnel with information security responsibilities, system or network administrators, or system developers. So these are the people you could potentially interview to determine if audit logging process failures are configured, alerts are configured. So whenever we saw like a title or a role or a team name in here, we created them under this bulk team creation. So going back, you see that system and network administrators is right here. So we have over here system and network administrators. This system and network administrator title was referenced under these 79 controls here. And there's that audit failure alerting. And so what you could do is create these teams. You would just click the checkbox and hit create. I've already created them. And then go down, find that team, system and network administrator here, and get someone added to that team, couple people, whoever your system admins are. Identify the team lead. Okay. Now all these people are going to be assigned responsibility for those 79 requirements, and they have to go and start reviewing them and identifying if they're implemented and defining how they're implemented. So that's what this populate is. That's what that populate. Help you build out the teams quickly. And we took it from the NIST guidance and the CMMC guidance. Okay. Any questions with people? We've covered, this is where you're creating your accounts, defining roles, defining teams, and assigning people to roles and teams. Any questions with people? Okay. So then we're going to move on to tools and documents. So under tools, this is where you're going to log all the technology, all the IT products, systems, applications, networking devices, infrastructure devices, cloud devices, vendors, external service providers. Okay. All your tools and services get logged here. And when you log them, it creates an entry. See all these squares? I refer to these as inventory items. Okay. So you log an item. Let's say firewall. I don't know, host-based firewall. You give it the mission and then you name it. I don't even know a host-based firewall solution, so I don't know why I picked that, but let's pretend Sentinel. I know it's a firewall somewhere, but let's say that was what you wanted to log. Is it online, meaning in the cloud hosted, or do you have it on site, on-prem, and hit log? So after you log an inventory item, then you want to go find it, open it up, and then start filling out this metadata here. And my recommendation would be to log everything that your company utilizes, operates, owns, manages, leases, okay? And then really use this compliance area to then identify if that inventory item that you logged is either out of scope or is it in scope of the requirements. But it's your call. Some clients choose to log only the items they know need to meet NIST 800-171. And some clients choose to log everything and then really rely on this asset category box to identify what needs to implement 171 and what's out of scope. Me personally, I would log everything, just because if I then say something is out of scope, in my overview, I could say, this asset is out of scope because, blah, blah, blah. If you've not gone through the CMMC assessment process, one of the first things the C3PAO and the assessment team is going to meet with you about is your assessment scope or your compliance boundary. They need to understand for your company what you said is in scope of NIST 800-171 and CMMC and what you said was out of scope. And any good assessment team is going to not, at a high level, they want to understand for the things that you said were out of scope, why did you say it was out of scope? Because you have to, for any out of scope assets, they need to be physically or logically separated. And they cannot store, process, or transmit CUI. They can't protect CUI data. There's a bunch of stuff in here. And so if I said something that was out of scope, I would make sure it meets all of these statements and it really fits the description of an out of scope asset. And then even in my evidence area, I would try to make it a point to upload some evidence that supports my out of scope categorization. You know, like it said, it needs to be physically or logically separated. So I would upload evidence of that logical separation. Maybe it's on a different VLAN or a different segment, completely different network. You know what I mean? And that's because you're going to have that discussion about scope at some point, and the assessor needs to know what's in scope and what you said was out of scope. And for the things that you said were out of scope, why did you say they're out of scope? And it may take you a year, year and a half, several months to have that assessment. And documenting your analysis of what's in scope and out of scope is only going to help you when you have to have that conversation with that assessment body. So if you forget about why you said something was out of scope, well, you could pull it up and see why you said it was out of scope and look at the evidence. But your call. At the very least, in the tools area, you do want to identify everything that is in scope of the requirements. And you just hit the plus button to start logging them. Unfortunately, at this time, we don't have any import capability, so you do have to hand jam them all in. We have an active area and we have a pending area. So anything you log up here is telling me that these are all active technology. They're currently in production. They're being utilized. But down here, these are things that the company plans to implement. So right here, it says Nessus vulnerability scanner. That tells me that in this environment, they're planning to acquire and implement a vulnerability scanner, the Nessus vulnerability scanner. When you create things down here, it puts them on your system POAM. So anything here is going to be logged on your system POAM, so that way you can track it until it gets purchased and implemented. Anything up here doesn't go on your system POAM. If you happen to put it in the wrong category, no worries. Just open up that inventory items folder and you could change it here. So right now this database is active. If I switch it to POAM or pending, I'm putting it on my system POAM. Okay. But so you'll log the tool and then open up the inventory item and fill out this data. All throughout FutureFeed, we're using the RACI model to clearly log and track responsibility. So R stands for responsible. Since we're in this SQL database, who's the team responsible for managing, administering that SQL database, right? So over here you got teams, but if you click on this, you can tag a individual if you need to, directly instead of a team. So who's responsible, who's accountable for making sure that this gets managed? So this is typically one person is the accountable person. In this case, maybe the IT director, information system owner, or if you're a smaller company, maybe the CEO. C stands for consulted. Anybody at the company, internal to the company or even external to the company, if you're working with any consultants, does anybody need to be consulted about SQL database or issues that arise with it? And then I is informed. So who needs to be informed about this? So all throughout FutureFeed, we're using the RACI model. Very important to at least get one of these objectives assigned to someone. And if you remember when I was showing you that default accountable role, whoever you set there is going to be the default accountable person for all of your inventory items. You can change it, but they're going to be the default. Let's say that this SQL database was being provided by an external service provider. Then you have some shared responsibility, and you can identify in this customer responsibility matrix who that company is. So company ABC is managing my SQL database for me, and that's how I associate that. Notice you got a lot of I have in this environment. I have a lot of options here. Yours will be blank. If you go over into documents, we have a category under reference documents, CRMs. So here's where you would log all your customer responsibility matrices or your shared responsibility. Again, hit the add, type it up. Now all of these will be an option in that drop down. So there's that company ABC that I had. There. Okay. Describe the system. You have a place to upload documents. Connect. This is an important feature. So here, what I'm doing is I'm going to start identifying the requirements, the NIST 800-171 requirements that are implemented on this IT asset or that are being implemented by this IT asset. So right now, this is a CUI asset. Okay, so I'm going to identify all of the requirements that are implemented on that asset. Okay, so you could, if you happen to know them, you could search for them by the number. So I think 31311 is what, CUI encryption at rest. So on my database, which is a CUI database, so there's CUI data in there, I need to have encryption. So I would associate that, also 311 access control to this database, session termination to the database, you would associate all of the requirements that are getting implemented on that box. And you can change the depth of your search or even search by keywords. So let's see. Let's type in REST. Data at rest, encryption. Okay. Now, if this was a security protection asset, like let me go to MFA. Over here, I'm connecting, let's say it's a security protection asset, and I'm connecting the controls, this is an MFA tool. So why am I implementing MFA in this environment? You would identify those requirements that have you implement MFA. And this is your evidence. This is the tool you're using. So you could search by multi-factor. Let's see what comes up there. Okay. So when you make these connections, now if I go to 375 here, require multi-factor authentication to establish non-local maintenance. All right, if I scroll down under the test area, which is where I find my technology, I'm going to see Duo two-factor or Duo MFA there. Okay. So when you make those connections, that's what you're doing, is you're populating the test area. For the tools, for any tools, when you make those connections, you're populating the test area of the requirements. So you could think of it as you're building out that body of evidence. Let me go back in here. So after you log some technology, open up the inventory item, fill out this metadata, highly recommend getting some personnel assigned as responsible, connect the security requirements, categorize the asset, and then over here, I'm going to show you what task assignments are and evidence are in a second. Any questions with the tools area? Refer to the getting started guides if you need some help. They change every page you're on. It's going to change what you see. If you click on online, it's going to talk about like the cloud assets and all that. So in documents, it's pretty much the same thing. You're going to log all your security documentation that the company has. Plans, policies, procedures, worksheets, shared responsibility matrices or customer responsibility matrices. You have a place for you to house your diagrams. So network diagrams, data flow diagrams, lists. This is where you're going to log your hardware software listing and maybe access control lists. Any other lists you have, you could log them there. Configurations. This is your configuration baseline documentation. You could log there. And then we have a place for you to log documents related to any assessments or audits. Again, there's two. You have active documents. So these are things that are approved, implemented, they're being enforced. And then if you scroll down, you have pending. So anything you're currently working on developing, log it here and it gets put on your system POAM. So you just hit the plus button, define what it is, name it, and then hit log, and then open up the item. So for example, if you're a company and you're just getting started and you don't have an access control policy, but you know you want to make one, you would hit plus, name it to a policy, access control policy, hit log. Now I'm going to go open up that item. And you have three options. You can use FutureFeed's live document editor, or you could attach a document, or you could link to it. Over here, we have an insert link. You could add maybe like the link to your SharePoint. So attach a document, link a document, or actually develop and work on that document in FutureFeed. So let's use this live document editor. Hit add. This is where then you could start typing out your document, or if you already have something started in a Word document, you could copy and paste it over. If you don't have anything, you want to use FutureFeed's templates, then you click on templates and you could search for the template you want to use, access control policy, hit use this template. And now you have something started. Of course, you'd go in here and you'd work on filling it out and tailoring it to your environment, right? Hit publish. So it does track history. If I go over here, here's some version history. It's going to create a new version every time I hit publish. So right now I'm on version 2. If I go back here and make some more edits, make some more changes, I could just close it out. I could just close this out. And it still going to have my changes in here. But if I want to, see, there's my changes. If I want to make this a version, then I hit publish. And now I'm on version 3. So it does keep some version history. You could restore back to a previous version if you want. So let's show you how the tasks works. And I'm sorry, I know I'm at time, so I'll wrap this up. But I'm going to just show you this, how it works. One thing is for tasks, you want to create tasks for that work that needs to happen to get things initially implemented. And then you also create tasks to make sure that the things that need to happen throughout the year happen. So think of like risk assessments. You need to have an annual risk assessment. So I would make an annual task for a risk assessment. Vulnerability scanning has to happen on a defined frequency. Let's say your company has decided to run vulnerability scans once a month. So in here, you would create a task. For vulnerability scanning, you would go to the vulnerability scanning procedure or maybe the vulnerability scanning document policy. Let's see. Here we have a vulnerability and malware procedure. So here's probably the document that I would make that task. Let's make one. Let's make a monthly. What? I must have caps on. Hold on. Monthly vuln scan. Okay. Assign it to the team who's responsible for doing vulnerability scanning. Make it good. And then make this one, I want this one to repeat monthly, starting today. And when the task is triggered, they have 7 days to complete that task. So hit submit. So now Austin, who's responsible for doing vulnerability scanning, is going to get alert every month when that vulnerability scan is due. He'll log into FutureFeed, and if he's unsure on what he needs to do, well, we're in the procedure, so he can go over here and look at your vulnerability scanning procedure and follow it to make sure he's doing what he needs to do. And he'll log in, you know, maybe he'll upload some documents. Maybe he uploads that vulnerability scan report, or he just takes a screenshot of the vulnerability scanning log. But you do want people to log that evidence in FutureFeed so you have it ready to go when you need to show the assessor or the auditor that you've done that activity. So they'll mark things as complete. Okay. So you're going to create tasks for that, what needs to be done initially and what needs to be done throughout the year. So here's that access control policy I created. Over here, I'm going to create a task. I need my CISO to review and approve this document. I'm going to assign it to my CISO. I'm just selecting random people here. And this is just a one-time thing. Hit submit. Now, when this person, let's assign it to Bradley. When Bradley logs into FutureFeed, he's going to see that he has a new task and he has to review and approve this document. He'll click on it. It's going to show him the working document. Okay. He'll look at it and then make any edits or remarks. But if it looks good, he can mark save complete and sign off on that document. Mark it complete. And now it's going to take me from the task assignment area. It kicked me over to the evidence. And here's my CISO approved policy. And there's the date and time signature. I cannot edit this one. Okay. Again, you want to get this connected to the requirements. You know, why did I write this access control policy? What were the requirements that I guess, warranted the development of this policy? So connect them. Okay. Any questions about documents? You have active documents, pending documents. Make sure you're sitting in the right category when you log a document, and then categorize it, log it, open it up, assign it to someone, determine if you're going to develop that document in FutureFeed or just attach it, the version, or link to it. Definitely make sure you connect it to the requirements, because here, again, you're building out that body of evidence. When you connect documents to the requirements for tools, when you made that connection, it populated in the test area here. But when you connect documents, it's going to show up in the examine area. So this is where all my documents. So you're just associating your technology and your documents with the requirements. So that way, when you do an annual assessment or a gap assessment, or you start assessing these controls, you already have the technology and the documents associated down below, so you can quickly review those items to determine if this requirement's implemented or not. So I'm going to stop sharing. I went over 5 minutes per the usual. Anything in the chat? Let me see. All right, there's no chat questions. Does anybody have any questions before we end the call? Nothing? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So I would recommend you sign up for that 15-minute minutes with FutureFeed sessions. So as you start working in FutureFeed, if you have any questions that come up or you're stuck on something, that is a place for you to ask that type of question. Or if you would rather, you can just email support@futurefeed.co, and I'm sure it will get assigned to me and I can help. I can provide you an answer through our ticketing system. You are welcome to sign up for this session again. You can attend as many sessions as you would like. And don't forget to sign up for the second training session whenever you feel ready to sit through that. And I'm going to talk about assessing, documenting your assessment results in FutureFeed, reviewing and approving your system security plan, and managing your system POAM in the second session. Yep, you're welcome, John. All right, thank you all. I hope you have a great afternoon. I'll talk to you, I'm sure, soon. Bye.